Welcome to About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your hosts, the AFC team, Mike and Al, are registered investment advisors who have a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's your AFC team, Mike and Al.
And it's Saturday, and we're going to be talking about money. Talking about money, Consumer Price Index came in. It was 3.2%. That's pretty nice.
It was a little bit better, Mike, than they were expecting. They were expecting 3.3.
That's a big change, Sal. We're going to be talking about that later in the program. I was going to be talking about that. Everywhere you look today, it seems like there's help wanted signs. But some states are addressing the shortage. How they're doing that? That's part of our program today. You'll want to hear that. Our guest today, we have a guest, is Andrew Cherin. He's got a lot of things to say, and I'm going to introduce you to part of the legal framework you probably don't hear much about, or you do hear much about but don't really understand. That's going to come up later in the program, so don't go away. And there's a part of the program, if you want to become really well known as a money manager, you just publish a book predicting the end of the world, or the end of the financial world as we know it. The latest is Martin Wise. He made the New York Times best-selling books, but it's not the first time he's been predicting disaster. He's been predicting it since 1981. 1981, that's only 42 years ago. Not a bad track record, but maybe that gives away what we have to say about him. It's not about doom and gloomers. We've got a lot of positive things to say too, but that's all coming later in the program. But let's begin with that Consumer Price Index. Tell us, Al.
So it went up 3.2. So we see somewhat inflation not really necessarily heading up and kind of stop. So they slow down a little.
The Fed is having an impact.
They did. They just raised a quarter point, a week ago? They raised a quarter point. So we're starting to see the Fed lag starting to take effect, I think. But other things have been happening too, Mike. You know, we've seen people taking money out of 401ks. We've seen them, what's called a hardship withdrawal. We've seen them rise by 36%.
But when you look at it, you know, those are Bank of America numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 15,000 some odd out of 4 million.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just a small thing or is it a major thing?
I don't know. I mean, because credit card debts have reached over, I think, was it over $1 trillion? We see credit cards rising too.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people now, you know, predicting that we're going to see a softening in the economy. As you and I have been saying, though, and we'll get into this more, the labor market is so dang tight.
And wages are rising.
Wages are rising. We get some evidence to show you that, and some, you know, we'll get into some of the micro issues here of the economy. But wages are rising.
That means people have more money to buy restaurants, to buy meals in restaurants,
and travel and do such things, which we've seen take off. We see airports are busier than ever.
Yep.
So I don't know. You know, I don't know what we'll see. If we'll see a slowdown, I'm not going to say we will. We won't. Who the heck knows? Nobody does till it happens.
You know, I've never been wrong in predicting the weather. I can tell you that it's going to snow in Seattle. I just can't tell you when. Tell you it's going to rain. I can't tell you when. I can tell you there will be a recession. Just can't tell you when.
Exactly. It's like you said in your set there about the guy who's predicting since 1981. Yeah, I mean, if I keep saying something, eventually it's going to come. I'm going to come true, right? The Mariners are eventually going to reach the World Series. Maybe not in my lifetime. I don't know, but they're eventually going to reach there.
They're the only team that has not reached the World Series.
That's what I'm saying. So anyway, eventually they're going to reach.
Back to the economy.
So I was reading stuff about the restaurant industry, which isn't, you know, a huge part of the economy, but states are doing things, changing laws to fill the gap in hiring. They're lowering the age for children to work in alcohol places where they serve alcohol, lowering the age for them to serve alcohol, or to bus tables in restaurants where they weren't allowed before. Several states, there's 20 states that have laws that are saying to try to, so children can work longer. You know, even during the school week where it was 7 o'clock, saying no kids can work till 9 o'clock in restaurants and things like that, because they're so tight, they're dying for employment.
And so they're lowering the age at which young people can serve alcohol?
Can work in an establishment around alcohol, because before they had to be of age of 18 or 21 to be in an establishment that served alcohol, because to protect vulnerable kids from being around that, and they're lowering those, which has some risk to it. And, we've seen things like sexual harassment and harassment rise in restaurants because a lot of these teenagers are just, they're unsure of themselves. They don't know the rules and the laws. And it's created quite a problem in the industry.
I mean, they're not mature enough to handle it. And serving alcohol, what keeps them from dipping into the supply?
Who the heck knows? But yeah, that's really from what I've been looking at. Didn't really delve into that problem, but just to give you an idea, restaurants have about 12.26 million employees, according to a June jobs report. It's 79% of restaurants, Mike, are having a difficulty hiring. 62% say they were understaffed.
And you see that when you go into restaurants.
Yep.
All the time. Understaffed. Poor service at times, slow service.
But workers who are not supervisors, pay rose 26% from January 21 to April of this year, from $13.96 an hour to $17.63. That's quite an increase.
Yeah, but when you think about it, think about a living wage. $17 an hour or $13 an hour is $26,000 a year.
Oh, no, right. But we're talking about teenagers. We're not talking about people that need to make a living wage. We're talking
That's
about,
true.
Right? We're not talking about, because, let me throw this at you. So teens remain cheap commanding $14.89 an hour compared with adults who command $27 an hour. So it's a lot more advantageous for restaurants to hire teenagers than it is to hire adults. And the other thing I didn't think about, because both of my daughters work in restaurants and have had some harassment issues, nothing severe, but they've told me about them, is that my kids, I'm paying for the health insurance for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Most restaurants don't cover health insurance. So that's a real cost savings to a restaurant if they have to cover adults who they're going to demand not only a higher pay, but also to be covered in health insurance and some benefit.
So they pay them $12 an hour less. They expose them to adult sexual harassment, things that they're when you think about an older person, they've had some lifetime experiences, but when you think about some kid that's 15 or 14 or 13, they don't have that experience, the world experience.
No, and experiences from my own daughters when they started working at 16 in some of the restaurants. They tell me some of the stories. But, it's kind of life imitating art. If you watch that series, a popular HBO series, Succession, one of the whole seasons is based off of a cover-up of the harassment on their cruise lines. So I was watching, I'm like, oh, this kind of fits in right in what I'm going to be talking about. So, but these are real problems, and trying to solve them by lowering the age. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that the push to have the right training in place for everybody so these kids know what their rules and what their rights are. And it's affecting major restaurants. I mean, McDonald's had issues, Chipotle, Chili's restaurants, they've all had lawsuits pending because of these issues.
But most of those restaurants are not serving alcohol, are they?
No, all of them serve alcohol.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, you can go to Chipotle and have a cold one with your tacos.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And McDonald's?
No, McDonald's, I don't think so. Unless you go to France. In France they do, right?
Well, in France, of course.
But we're not talking about France. But anyways, no, Chipotle you can. I'm sure Chili serves alcohol. I've never been to one. But that's what's going on.
So what's the impact of
The impact of that? Well, the impact to the economy in large, I think that restaurants, the impact is they need these employees, and I think it helps some of these kids. Some of these kids could use the work. I know my kids definitely like having the work and like having the money. In the businesses, it does help the businesses fill some gaps in their employment and keep costs down. Now, as I said, I don't know how, I didn't look at how much the restaurant industry was, what percentage of it is of the economy, but it is going to help, move us through this, word I'm trying to think of, this, short supply of employment. We're still stuck at 3.5% unemployment. So,
and we're still.
We're still short.
4 million workers.
Yeah.
For the jobs.
Right.
But
So
it seems like we're moving backwards in terms of child labor laws.
I don't think we're moving backwards. I think it's just some relaxed relaxing some of the laws to get us over this hump. I don't know. As I said, they said the states that put these forth with the training program, they were all the industry and the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission was for that. But the ones that are doing without training were trying to force the restaurant industry to say, hey, you need to do some training among these kids so we don't have this problem.
Well, there's an advantage in that they have jobs and they're learning a work ethic.
Yes, there's that.
But really the right thing to do?
I don't remains to be seen.
It does. Don't go away. We're about to introduce our guest. You want to hear what he has to say and about his industry. We'll be right back after this commercial break. So we're here with Andrew Cherin. Did I pronounce it right?
Close, Sharon.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I get it wrong a lot of times. I apologize for that. Andrew, tell us about who you are and what you do.
My name is Andrew Cherin. People injured in car accidents, some slip and falls, and that's about it.
So let's start with your background. Give us your background. Give people some introduction to who you are.
Yeah, I'm local to Seattle. I'm from West Seattle High School. I'm a West Seattle native and went to Seattle University School of Law and Washington State University. And I've lived here basically my whole life. I've lived in Los Angeles for about a year, but other than that, I've just been local.
And so did you start directly from law school with your own firm?
You know what? I did. And I think the time that I came out of school was such a bad time in the economy. I graduated law school in 2011, and I started right off the bat opening my own firm. I worked for a personal injury firm before transition, so I had some background and stuff in the area, but I just hit the ground running as a solo early on.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us about the road opening your own business.
Man, opening your own business is, it's really challenging at times, especially starting up. It's statistics say, 9 out of 10 businesses fail within the first 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And it was a long haul to start off, trying to find clients, and that's the name of the game, really. And, any type of business is how can you create business? And starting off brand new, it was friends and, relatives that would send me cases here and there. I got a couple car accident injury cases that I started off with, and I kind of slowly built that up through case here, another case there, and then I started doing some networking, trying to find out where I'm going to find clients from, who's going to be the best referral source for me to get my business going. So I spent so much time reading business books, reading how to figure out ways to generate those clients to come in, joining kind of networking,
So tell us about the clients that you see. Tell us what's happened to them. What's your perfect client, or the perfect client, or what type of clients? I mean, there's no perfect client for you.
That's such a tricky thing to say. What's a good client for me? A good client is, someone that's been injured in a car accident. It's never fun to go through something like that. Yeah. And so hopefully the injuries aren't too severe. It makes for a better case if the injuries are worse, but, dealing with the personal side, dealing with that. The less injuries, the better in some ways. If I can get more cases, hopefully the goal is that people get better and 100% get much.
Yeah, this kind of parallels our business a little bit, Mike, in the sense that, we deal with people's money, but maybe you can see this too. It's more the emotion around it that you have to deal with that gets in the way of sometimes trying to help somebody through their situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of it's the personal side of things, and that's kind of one area that I like to, I think sets myself apart from some other personal injury firms.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm a solo, so the person that's injured in a car accident is going to be dealing directly with me, not some secretary or anything like that. And they get direct answers and access to me.
That's how we work too. I mean, our clients get direct access to us. They're not calling a 1-800 number.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple car accidents. It's been a long, long time. 93 was the last one. But anyway, when somebody's in an accident like that, who's rear-ended or whatever happens, I don't know, the emotional side of that, they're victims. Do they have that feel that they're victims? They've been victimized? How do they get through that emotional thing?
That's a good question. How does someone get through the trauma of being in a car accident? Some seek, personal help through psychologists or psychiatrists, and, for PTSD related to being involved in a car accident. Some deal with the emotional side a little bit differently than others, and they'll just deal with the pain that they're dealing with and getting the treatment that they need for the physical injuries more than the emotional side. I try to be the calming voice that tells them, you're going to be okay, things are going to work out, and I'm going to handle all the insurance and information stuff, and let them focus on healing. And, they can just focus on their appointments with their doctors and stuff. But it's a very traumatic event to go through a car accident, big or small.
We live in West Seattle. And just recently, there was the big crash on Seattle. 2 cars driving down Alki at 80 to 100 miles an hour. And a young woman who's turning left into the condo garage. And one of those cars hits her car, spins it over the wall into the ocean. And she was lucky that there were people standing by. It happened like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There were people standing by that were able to break into the window because all you could see in the picture of the car is the license plate. The rest of the car was underwater. They broke the window. Somebody had a knife and cut her seatbelt off. How do you go through the trauma of that? She was doing nothing. She's turning left into a garage, and suddenly cars hit. She's essentially blown over the side of the wall into the water, and I don't know. I would be afraid to get into a car again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about car accidents. You never really are trying to get in a car accident, and most don't even see it coming. And if they do see it coming, then you're always going to be looking in the rearview mirror and wondering if you're going to get hit next. There's definitely a lot of PTSD around car accidents.
So you and I talked about, so for someone like that person, they call you. How long does the process take, to get through insurance and get the money from the insurance to cover their medical cost?
Yeah, for the vehicle damage, you can get money right away for that. For the personal injury side and the medical bills and navigating the insurance company, it can take a little bit longer. But originally, right up from the outset, we try to figure out how we're going to get the medical bills paid initially, because to get a settlement from the insurance company, you usually have to wait until the person is fully healed that's injured in the car accident.
Oh, you do? Okay.
At least to get a settlement from the person that's at fault, or going after the uninsured or underinsured motorist policy.
Right.
So that part could take a while, but you want to find the ways to get the medical bills paid right away. So you use medical insurance or personal injury protection through their own auto insurance.
Right.
So you kind of have to pay up front from your side and figure out ways to do that. But there's so many options out there.
Interesting. What other options do you have besides those to do?
Well, there's the medical insurance. You can use your own medical insurance. You can use your own auto insurance, personal injury protection, or MedPay. Or some doctors will treat on a lien and give you treatment.
Oh, really?
And then get paid out of the settlement.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Some doctors are willing to do that.
So I would guess that the insurance companies will step right up and say, we want to take care of you, right?
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a lot of finger pointing involved at times.
Yeah.
It can get complicated, but, for the most part, it works itself out.
So I would imagine I've made that comment facetiously. I know what it's like dealing with medical insurance. I know what it's dealing with. The insurance companies seem to hire people to refuse claims. Is that right?
I mean, it seems like it at times, doesn't it? They're trying to deny everything, and you got to fight for things. Unless you have an attorney, it's going to be an uphill battle because, they can just say what they want, and most people will just take it as their word that that's the truth, when in fact it's not the truth at all, and they're entitled to way more than what they're even offering.
Yeah, and the plans and the documents is so complex. You need an attorney just to read through some of the language. You and I were talking about that earlier. It's just some of these plans are written, and they're hard to figure out what your rights actually are.
Yeah, there's a lot of loss surrounding the, what's owed back to the insurance companies too, out of each settlement, and state law specifics that can change whether you're getting more money in your pocket than you think you're going to get, and a lot of money that could be owed back.
So take me through a typical thing. So a person is in an auto accident. They have some injuries. They get the medical expense paid by medical. But the insurance company then comes back and says, we'll give you X amount. And that X amount is not very great, I would assume. So what happens?
Well, what happens is you call me, and then I'll, lay down the hammer, I guess, so to say.
At what point should somebody call you?
Oh, right away. If someone's in a car accident, I think it's good to get advice from a lawyer. We offer free consultations, as do many other personal injury law firms. And the sooner you get them involved, the better, because then you figure out what your rights are, what actually is going to happen, and then, ease a lot of the stress that someone's going through that's dealing with the trauma of being injured in a car accident.
And when somebody's in a car accident and it's trauma and there's a lot of emotional, is there a tendency to say, okay, and then realize afterwards, that you really need an attorney?
Yeah, I mean, you can go through and get treatment and then hire a lawyer later. Absolutely. It's not, the case is not settled until, someone signs a settlement release. So there's a lot of options still, even if you're late in the game. In Washington State, the statute of limitations is 3 years to settle with an insurance company for a car accident injury case. So you have some time, but it's better to talk to an attorney sooner than.
And you help arrange the medical as well, right?
The medical payments of the medical treatment, the medical billing and stuff like that. Yeah, I help try to figure out ways that the people injured in car accidents can get the medical treatment that they need and medical bills paid, and what avenues to go down to do that.
Okay, so if someone has been in an accident, tell them how they contact you.
If someone's been in a car accident, they can contact me by calling me directly, 206-850-6716, or checking out my website, CHERIN Cherin Law Firm.
Awesome. So if you are in an accident, if you know somebody who's been in an accident, if you know somebody that's had a personal injury, call Andrew. Yes, welcome back. We've been talking with Andrew Cherin.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. We've been talking about personal injury. If you've been in a car accident, if you've suffered another personal injury, don't wait and call Andrew. It's important to do that soon and right away, and find out what you can do. No matter what your circumstances have been, whatever they are, call Andrew. Andrew, give us the information, phone number, information, how they can contact you.
Yeah, they can contact me at 206-850-6716, and we give free consultations, and we're paid out of the settlement, so anyone can afford to hire us.
Perfect. Okay, you got that. Give the number one more time.
206-850-6716 or SharonLawFirm.com.
Perfect. Okay. So, Al.
Yes, sir.
Al, you want to become a really noted financial advisor?
I'll think about it.
Ah, sure. So, Bob Veres wrote an article, Insider Information Newsletter for Financial Magazine, said if you really want to become a really noted financial advisor, just pick any old day and call a reporter or a TV channel host or hostess and predict the stock market is going to crash. Just like we've never seen it before. Worse than 2008, worse than the pandemic. And it's never, ever going to recover. Never, ever. But you have the answer to get people through it. The latest one was that I received, and I receive these all the time, but the latest one that came this week was from MarketBeat, Martin Weiss, PhD, predicting, and it gave a list of his predictions. In 2008, he predicted 484 bank failures. There were only 485 that failed, so that's a 99.8% correct call. And he says now there's going to be 100% of banks that are going to fail. He has any number of predictions. He predicted the housing crisis. He's predicted every stock market crash since 1987. He predicted the housing bubble of 2007. He predicted Donald Trump would be elected in 2016. He predicted the rise of high inflation. He said historically high inflation, but I mean, we haven't reached historically high inflation in 2022, but he said he predicted it. He predicted the war in Ukraine. He predicted the rise in energy prices. He sounds like a super forecaster. And of all that, he says, it's nothing like what is going to happen. Nothing of what's going to happen. But if you understand what to do, both security and prosperity you will have as you've never imagined before. All you've got to do is pick up the phone and call him. All you got to do is pick up his book and read his book. Pay for the $45 or $50. And just think of this. His big claims of predictions, most people will never predict what he predicted before or when he predicted. His predictions are not new. He wrote The Great Money Panic and How to Survive It. Actually, a 400-page book. The Big Money Panic and How to Survive It. And he wrote that in 1981. 1989, he wrote another book called The Money Panic, How to Survive. 8 years later. 2005, he wrote Investing with Fear. I guess he ran out of titles. He couldn't call it The Money Panic anymore. And in 2011, The Ultimate Money Guide, Bubble, Bust, Recessions, and Depressions. And in 2023, his newest book is called The Ultimate Depression Survival Guide. And you know what? It's on the New York bestsellers list, you know? And you can't say that he's going to be wrong. A broken watch is right twice a day. Think about it. If the watch is broken and it shows 10:04 at 10:04 a.m., 10:04 p.m., it's going to be right. But do readers really check it out and think about it? Probably not. I mean, Vera's pointed out some of the examples. Andrew Roberts of the Royal Bank of Scotland in June predicted that we were just around the edge from a banking crisis to think the unthinkable. That was the phrase he used. Think the unthinkable. Yeah, it was June 2010, which was 13 years ago, and it was supposed to happen within 6 months before the end of 2010. Didn't happen. Mark Faber, who's picked up the nickname of Dr. Doom. In 2009, he predicted hyperinflation, 100%, with the Fed injecting money into the system. Hyperinflation, 100%. 2013, he wrote his second book called and predicting a 1987 type of crash. With no warning, we were going to have a crash in 2013. We haven't seen it yet. You know, Michael Lombardi, Profit Confidential, the Great Crash of 2013. He wrote that in 2012, of course. Said that we were having a crash. Jerry Robinson wrote a book called The Bankruptcy of the United States, predicting that the dollar was going to sink into oblivion, was going to be worthless, was going to be nowhere to be found, and only he had the answer. Now, I mean, you have to choose. Is it Martin Weiss? Is it Andrew Roberts? Is it Mark Faber? Is it Michael Lombardi? I go to some conferences and hear some of these people speak. And what they do is they say, now, if you really want to get through all this, if you want the security and the greatest thing that's ever going to happen in your life, just fill out your name and information and open an account and we'll get you through it. Yep, they have all the answers and they'll get you through it. Negativity sells. And in this world, there are so many changes going on. A lot of people reach that point where they do have a tremendous amount of fear. And so when people talk about inflation kicking off, when people talk about the inverted yield curve, when people talk about the recession of 2022, well, maybe not 2022, maybe 2023, maybe 2024, that scares people. And they begin to think about, what do I do? One of the biggest worries people have is running out of money. It's because this is the money I have. Am I going to see it disappear? These people prey on that fear. They give you all sorts of predictions, and nobody ever seems to check out, were they really right? Were their past predictions really correct? You know,
Mike, just to give you a little historical, the stock market has never had, it's only had 3 times where it's fallen more than, in the last 70 years, more than 3.
Yep.
That was 39, 40, 41, 72, and 73, when what was going on in 39, 40, and 41. And we know what was going on in, the World War II. 73 and 74 was the
oil crisis,
right? And then 2000 was the dot-com bubble. 2000 and 2000 into 2001 was then 9/11, and then 2002 the aftermath of 9/11.
Yep.
And those are the only 3 times.
But it doesn't mean, Granville.
Anything can happen, right? I mean, anything can happen. Yeah. But historically, it doesn't pray that the market's going to tank that bad.
But, there are people that continue to predict it. Robert Prechter used the Fibonacci curve. Fibonacci curve is a curve that occurs in nature. Mm-hmm. And he was correct in calling the 1970s and the 1969 period of time. And then in 2000, what did he predict? No, 2008, he predicted the Dow would reach 1,000. The Dow had already fallen from over 10,000 to 6,600. And Prechter was predicting it would reach 1,000. I mean, think about what has to go on for the Dow to reach 1,000? How many companies have to go broke?
It's funny, Mike. I can't remember the book I read, but somebody did a study on these people who make these predictions. And what they find out is that they've made one right prediction. And then they go on and on and on to keep trying to make these predictions. And just because they've been right one time doesn't mean they're going to keep being right. In fact, they're wrong more than they're right.
So I think, coming out of 1987, I remember that period of time because I was just 2 years into my being a stockbroker at the time. And one of the people that saw on the Friday before Black Monday and advised his clients to buy puts on the market was Marty Zweig.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And by putting 2% of their portfolio into a put on the market, on Monday, that put soared as the market crashed. And for years, Marty Zweig was considered the guru of the market because he got that one thing right, just what you said. Mm-hmm. One time he was right. His clients did extremely well. But over the long period of time, he was not able to beat the market. He got one thing. And I think that happens with a lot of money managers. The statistics show.
Well, I mean, if you make so many predictions, especially about the market, you're not going to be right. You might be right once in a while. But, in his last newsletter, his memo, Howard Marks talked about this, that he's only been right 5 times. And only when he sees these massive sea changes does he predict where the market's going. He says trying to predict it every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, whether they're going to have recession or what's going to happen. He said, I would be wrong more than I would ever be right. He said, but when I see the massive sea changes like I saw in the 70s when I started, and when I saw in 2000 when the dot-coms were going to go, and when I saw in 2008 when I saw, he said, those I could predict, but anything else, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. John Cherin wrote a book called The Money Masters. He talked about Warren Buffett. He talked about
Templeton.
Thoreau, Templeton, Price. Yeah. We're coming to commercial break, but we'll come back to this right after the commercial break. Don't go away. It's important to understand what's going on and what you hear from these so-called predictors and forecasters. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
About Money with the AFC team, Mike and Al on AM 1300, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
So we've been talking about forecasting, the people that are so negative. So back in there's a person called Philip Tetlock, psychology and political science. He got his PhD from Berkeley in 1987. He's been dealing with predictions and people who make predictions. And back in 87, he took a broad array of experts to talk about predictions in domestic politics, economics, international relations, all those predictions. What was going to happen with the USSR, the Gulf War, Japanese real estate bubble, Quebec, all those majors. And he wrote the conclusion in a book called Expert Political Judgment. And what he said is all those experts, all those people that were the gurus, all those people that were supposed to be the very best at predicting what was going to happen, their predictions were not any better than random chance. They were grossly overconfident. 15% of the events said that there was no possibility they would ever happen. Actually did happen. 25% of the things they said, they are table-pounding, assured events. You can count on them happening. Absolutely. 25% never happened. 25% failed. They were economics, political, international affairs. He said the experts have 80% confidence in their predictions, but they only get it right 45% of the time. And he talked about 2 types of personalities. He talked about hedgehogs, who were type A personalities who always had big ideas, and foxes, who had a plethora of small ideas, little ideas, and a multitude of approaches. And what he found in his studies since then and so on is that some experts are really better than others. And on the losing side, those who are not as good are usually the experts whose opinions are most often cited in the big names you hear. Think about it. The Jim Cramers, the Susie Ormans. Their opinions are cited very often, and they're usually wrong. He found that the more interviews an expert had done with press, the worse their predictions tended to be. And when confronted, he said they usually have 1 of 4 answers. I thought this was great. And the first answer is, if only. Their prediction would have worked if only the Fed had raised rates, or if only the Fed hadn't raised rates, or if only the government hadn't put in a stimulus plan, or if only the government had not done this, or if only. That was the first reason. The second reason was ceteris paribus. Something outside the model. I predicted that this was going to happen, but something that no one ever knew was going to happen. The third reason, I was almost right. I was almost right. It almost happened, you know. I was almost right that Quebec was going to secede from Canada. Almost. Or, the one that I love is, it just hasn't happened yet. You can't judge a forecast or performance on a single forecast. And the one I love is Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow saying the Bush tax cuts are going to stimulate the economy. Remember that? You maybe not remember that, but I remember that. We're not in a recession, he said in 2007. We are not in a recession. The Bush tax cuts are going to lift the economy and everything's going to be much better. Even when everyone else was saying, we are in a recession. We are seeing it. We are seeing the subprime mortgages collapse. We're seeing the housing market collapse. It was Kudlow saying, just hang on. Just hang on. We haven't seen the full effects of the Bush tax cuts. He continued that right until April of 2008. And by 2007, everyone knew we were in a big problem. You know, we live in a world where you can't be sure of the forecast. You can't be sure of what's going to happen. I can say it's going to snow in Seattle. I can't tell you when. I know that the probability, and there's a very good probability that it is going to snow, but I can't tell you when. When I begin to predict that the Dow is going to be at 100,000, and I believe it is going to happen someday, I can't tell you when. Is it going to happen 10 years from now? Is it going to happen 60 years from now? I don't know. We can be fairly good at direction, but we can't be absolute. I mean, you can predict that ice cream sales are going to be higher in the summertime than in the wintertime. That's fairly straightforward, but can you predict the exact number of ice cream sales you're going to have? No. You can't predict them both for summer or winter, and you can't predict the temperature. You know, we do our own research, but we can't predict the earnings. We don't try to predict a company's going to earn $12.10 or they're going to earn $1.30. That's what people ask analysts to do, and when they miss the earnings by 1 penny, the whole world collapses. The stock drops 20% because they missed the earnings by a penny. Or if they beat the earnings by 12 cents, the stock suddenly takes off and goes higher. You know, trying to predict that accurately is a very difficult thing. You can predict that the earnings are going to be higher in the future, or they're going to be lower in the future. That can work. I love the example of Northwest Orient Airlines. They're long gone. They became Northwest. But Northwest Orient Airlines, the joke was that they were always on time. They figured out how to always be on time. They just predict the day they would arrive. Not the time, just the day at which they would arrive. And they would normally be on time. You know, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know for sure where the market's going to be. We don't know where the stocks are going to be. But we can make predictions. Just like you said, Al, 3 years is 3 negative years is the worst the stock market's done.
In the last 70 years, there's been 3 times where it's 3 years.
So there's the high probability is if we see the market drop in a year, the probability is that within a year or two, it's going to be back up again.
And it's going to reach new time highs.
Yeah.
But the mistake most investors make, Mike, is panicking and listening to those panics and then selling at the bottom. If you buy at the top and the stock market tanks, you're better off buying at the top than selling at the bottom. Because,
yep.
And that's a mistake the average investor makes, is buying at the top and then selling at the bottom.
And listening to a Martin Wise, who correctly predicted every panic, every market crash there's ever been. Well, maybe just since 1987.
Yeah, we did a whole show back on how forecasts are so bad, and trying to predict the macro forecast is so bad that the great investors as Howard Marks and Warren Buffett don't even do it. They basically come out and say, the future's not knowable. We don't know, but we can make somewhat accurate predictions about a company that we can study and see consistent earnings, or how the management's trying to look towards the long term over the short term. We've talked about that too, where, companies get short-term focused, try to focus on beating the quarter to make the Wall Street estimates and lose focus of the long-term perspective of the company. And the company might do well for a couple quarters, but then all of a sudden the wheels start coming off and that company's in serious trouble. We could even say like a Disney, right? Yep. In serious trouble. They lost focus of who their long-term customer is and what they were doing to make money, and this company's spiraling.
It makes sense to pay attention to what the past predictions have been, not what the current predictions are. It makes sense to stay long-term, not short-term. And it makes sense not to panic, but to really be reasonable, logical, and rational. And that brings us to the end of the program today. We'll be back next Saturday, because if it is Saturday, we are talking about money. Have a great week and a weekend. And we have more coming next week.